So let's actually talk about what views and vistas are, and then we're going to go into how they can be used in 3D and how they can be used in 2D.
Yeah.
The theory is the same. The methodology is a little different because you're dealing with a flat plane.
Yeah.
So go ahead and read this off.
Well, I'm just going to summarize that.
Yeah.
Views is they highlight. They're okay. Views are observation points.
Right.
Okay, and you can use them to focus on one or two objects in a frame. Okay, or you can use a special camera moves by still focusing on an object or two.
Right.
Vistas, on the other hand, are a type of view that shows distant objects and far off landscapes. So think of your big forest landscape.
Right.
And in the distance are those mountains.
Right.
Well, that's a vista, whereas a view is those trees in the foreground.
Right. The great example, and I think it's actually mentioned in this article, is when you escape the prison in Oblivion. The first thing you see once you're out of the Imperial City prison is that first alien ruin, which is the starter dungeon.
It's the starter. Yes, it is.
That is the beginner dungeons. So let's just go ahead and jump right in here. They list these. We're gonna go in and out of order. The whole point of having a view or a vista is to draw someone into the experience, that UX we talk about.
Yeah.
They mention pacing right here, which is a very common function of Vista. It even says it written right there, because it gives them it gives the player a chance to take in your world.
Yes.
You know, so if you're designing this big, beautiful fantasy world with luscious trees and floating islands and flying whales with cities on their back, somebody make that game. And you have your character standing on a cliff right outside the starter town, and he takes that in. You're now giving the player a taste of things to come.
That's exactly what a Vista does.
And that's what you, as a game developer, want to use the Vistas for, among other things.
Yeah.
You know, give them that breadth of what you're trying to create. On a 2D plane, if you're building like a game in a Game Maker Studio or RPG Maker, instead of having your character standing on the edge of a cliff and overlooking a blue sky or the mountainscape, actually go into Photoshop and create that background, you know, image to show like the kingdom that they're going to go to.
Oh, that's a good one.
The dark tower in the background where the evil wizard is, those kind of things. You know, build a vista, because walking to the edge of a 2D cliff and seeing a sky or a mountain is nice.
Yeah.
But seeing the world, seeing what you're going to be experiencing,
that is so much more. You just upped your UX.
Yes. Burke says, "Who told you about my floating islands?" But this is also another thing that vistas and views can be used for, and that's highlighting goals and landmarks.
Which, in that Oblivion example you gave, it's that alien ruin. That's your starter dungeon.
Exactly. And if you want to take it even further, like for example in Breath of the Wild, here is Death Mountain. Yeah, Death Mountain. So they show that in the distance as well. So you as a developer can use these views and vistas.
Yeah.
Again, 3D and 2D does not matter, to show the goal. You know, showcase what, not just what the beauty of the world is, but where the player eventually is going to end up. Now, it doesn't have to be the actual location. This doesn't necessarily have to be the rendered Death Mountain.
No.
It probably is, but it doesn't have to be.
No.
Because just having Link here and looking here, we know we're going to go here and fight a thing.
There you go. Yeah.
So use that as well. Also, gosh, here's a fantastic one. Assassin's Creed Unity, despite all its problems, is a great vista of, look at that beautiful parish. Look at that.
Yeah, Assassin's Creed has always taken advantage of the Vista.
They literally turned vistas into a game mechanic by those points that you climb up. There's the eagle floating around, and Altair, Enzio, or whoever gets a view, a vista of the area, and then all the locations are mapped out.
Right.
And then you jump into a hay pile. So they turned vistas into a mechanic.
They did.
Which, booyah for that. Booyah.
Highlighting future gameplay paths. Yes.
You can build in a view or a vista of your critical path. You know, if your character, let's say that you're building Steampunk London. Okay, and you have Steampunk London, and your character is standing on the clock face of Big Ben, looking out over Steampunk London, knowing that they have to get to the Old Bailey.
Yeah.
Okay. And if they see the Old Bailey in the distance, and then the player looks and sees that there's actual pathways, maybe along the train tracks here, maybe the back alleyways where Jack the Ripper's waiting over there, you know, and they kind of get an idea, even if it's not 100% to scale, the idea is there that they will be going in this direction,
in this particular path to get to
where they're going.
Old Bailey, yeah.
So that way they have in their head an idea of what's to come.
Right.
And it's your, at that point, developer, you deliver on some of those promises, and then you also subvert their expectation by throwing in those delicious curveballs. Maybe they enter in the London Underground for a while.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Maybe they go into you know, one of the buildings, one of the palaces or something, and have an experience there. Or maybe they have to go to like this large steampunk tram station. Whatever. You're building to them an expectation, and then you appropriately fulfill and subvert.
And so just as you can highlight future paths, you can also show previously explored paths.
Yeah, there's nothing in the world more fulfilling than when you get out of a really bad dungeon and your character gets out and looks back and sees that really bad dungeon's behind them.
Yeah.
There's that feeling, oh, thank God.
It's a big feeling of relief.
It's gone.
And touching upon pacing, it is a slowdown moment.
Yeah.
So it allows you to catch your breath, and we need those, remember, we need those breaks, those slowdown moments between intense gameplay moments.
Right, those moments of respite, that where you get to just chill for a minute. A really good example would be in, actually a really good example is Final Fantasy VII Remake, when you're climbing the plates to get to Shinra.
There you go, yeah.
You actually, a number of times, get to see the old slums, the wall market. You get to see those. You get to see where the plate collapsed, and those people were killed. So you're getting an overview of the entire game you were in, using an absolutely stellar vista.
Yeah.
So that's another way. Large gameplay, show a puzzle scenario. There we go.
Yes.
Tomb Raider is mentioned here. Tomb Raider uses that a lot. The train yard in Final Fantasy VII Remake, as much as I hated it, it did give you an overview. It did do
that. It did give you a large overview of that whole puzzle dungeon.
Yes. You can also use views. Now let's switch over. We've been talking a lot about vistas. Let's talk about individual views where you're focusing on objects.
Okay.
Games that can do that, I think, like, I don't know if Dragon Quest XI did it, but have you ever entered into a dungeon and they'll show certain parts of the dungeon, like you enter into a sewer dungeon in a game, and they'll show like a junction point here where they have some enemies. They'll show maybe an area where guards are doing patrols, you know, and they'll show like maybe a set of canals where there's a switch that reroutes the water, and then, you know, sparkles the name of the dungeon, Sewers of Boo, and then boom, goes back to your character. Yeah. So you can use those views in a cinematic way. Remember how you mentioned early at the very beginning that you can focus in with a special sequence?
Yes.
You can use a view in there with cutscenes, cinema, to give them an idea of what's to come. So in actuality, everything we just went over, you could have the giant panoramic vista, or the very tight, highly focused view. They're the same thing, just one's camera out and one's camera in.
Yeah.
Here we go, continuing.
It'll hint a new mechanic or a system.
Aforementioned, where you look at a switch that routes the flow of water in a canal.
Yes.
You have your little view there. If you want to keep it live so that it's not part of a cutscene but part of gameplay, when you approach that, you could kind of have the character zoom in, like have the view zoom in, see that, and then view back out. You know, you're drawing attention to it, and then pulling back. Those are other ways that you can use views, highlighting the theme of an area.
Yes.
You know, pretty much the same thing as before here. Here's our little forest here in Breath of the Wild. You know, thematically, what are you going into?
Yeah, the Eternal Sonata did that with the introduction of the poison swamp.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
They kind of pulled back, and you saw the whole swamp area. And this was the first area you encountered in the whole game that the environment was toxic.
Right. So they showed that with the color purple, the poisonous gases. They gave you enough environmental information along with the cinematic pans to say this is a poisoned area. It's then reinforced.
Yes, it is.
By having the characters actually mentioning that as well. Yeah. So between the view and the dialogue of the NPCs, you know you're in an area where you're going to take environmental damage.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 13, despite all of its flaws, uses views and vistas pretty much flawlessly. You know exactly the world you're going into. You know the theme of that area of Cocoon or Grand Pulse. You know from start to finish what you're experiencing in Final Fantasy 13's world.
Yeah.
So, and then, yeah, telling a story outside of gameplay space. You know, here's a real good one. So you have, actually, I kind of thought for a second, I got distracted by this really cool picture. But let's say you have a game where, you know, aliens are invading the Earth.
Yeah.
Okay. And your character survives the initial alien invasion encounter, runs out onto the streets with some NPCs, and then they look up and in the distance they see alien ships destroying the Washington Monument.
There you go. Yeah.
That's outside of your gameplay space, but it's giving you part of the story that the aliens are destroying Washington, D.C.
There it is. Yeah.
So that's how you can use views and vistas. And in a view sense, you would zoom in and show focus on the Washington Monument being destroyed. In a vista sense, they'd be like on top of a building showing that entire part from, you know, the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, all that just being nuked.
Right.
So view versus vista accomplishes the same thing. The aliens are invading. This is a huge one.
Yes,
this is massive.
Increasing the world size.
That is so important.
Yeah.
Your world is finite. Your game world is only so big. And it's never going to be infinite.
Yeah.
But with these views and these vistas, you can make it look so much bigger.
Yeah.
So much more. They even do it in my favorite open world game, Skyrim. There's a point where there's an invisible wall and I can't go any further, but there's still mountains and valleys and such.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
I run to the very, very edge of the play map.
Right.
And try to look out over to try to find Cyrodiil.
Pretty much. And emotional rewards.
Ah, yes.
Emotional rewards. There's something very satisfying about seeing the color and beauty of the world around you. In the aforementioned alien invasion story, you know, if your characters, you know, are escaping an area where some things are trying to kill them, and then they momentarily come out on a place where there's overgrowth, it's very beautiful, there's flowers blooming, there's birds singing. It's this, there's still parts of the earth that are safe.
Yeah.
Still parts of the earth that we could... Nier Automata does that.
Oh, that does very well.
Very, very well, where you're like, you know, robots trying to kill you, weird ass shit happening, and then you come to this like abandoned shopping mall, and it's like, even with all this destruction, there's still beauty.
Yeah.
So
the biggest thing that these set, the views and vistas, is it sets your expectations.
Yeah.
It's a very good way to set player expectations. And you live up to those expectations, and you've just contributed very positively to the user experience.
Absolutely. This sentence sums it up right here. Views and vistas are far more important than we realize. Every developer who is listening to this, take a look at every aspect of your game where you have the ability to use sight to tell your story, whether it's casting a little far or very far, and ask yourself, am I using the views and vistas properly? If you're not, you're actually selling yourself and your game short.
Yeah.
So take advantage of views and vistas. You won't be sorry.
You will not.